what are we doing here? Like, you're an Obama speechwriter. If you talk this way about the Klan versus black people, people would understand that you are a white supremacist. But when you talk about Israel versus Palestinians, people still have not reached a level of understanding that you are operating on the same exact supremacist belief system. All right, we're going to start our broadcast with the former Obama speechwriter, Sarah Hurwitz. Okay? Laments to Jewish Federation that people are finding content from Al Jazeera and Nick Fuentes on social media and seeing the videos of the carnage in Gaza. And she basically says something that I've been saying for the longest time. This is something that I've brought up quite a bit. But the difference is, for her, it's basically saying the quiet part out loud. Because, like, you know what my perspective on Israel-Palestine is. You know what my perspective on Gaza is. Let's take a look.
Since October 7th, but really before then, there have been huge shifts in America on how people think about Jews and Israel. And I think that is especially true of young people. So we are now wrestling with a new, I think, generational divide here. And I think that's particularly true in that social media is now our source of media. And this, it used to be that the media you got in America was American media, and it was pretty mainstream. It generally didn't express extreme anti-Israel views. You had to go to a pretty weird bookstore to find global media and fringe media. But today, we have social media, which is a global medium, right? Its algorithms are shaped by billions of people worldwide who don't really love Jews. And so while in the 1990s, a young person probably wasn't going to find Al Jazeera or someone like Nick Fuentes, today those media outlets find them. They find them on their phones. It's also this increasingly post-literate media.
Just wait, okay? Just wait. First of all, aside from the fact that she said it's like weird bookstores or whatever, like, what she's saying is not wrong, right? What she's saying is not wrong as far as, like, the energy that she's putting to it is obviously negative. But what she's saying is correct. The pro-Israel narrative was dominant in mainstream discourse. However, nowadays, with the democratization of the media, with the invention of social media and information that you can find easily online, especially with the algorithm. Yes, no, I don't think Al Jazeera hates Jews, chatters. Of course not. But the point is, what she's saying is true as far as how much the outlets, how many new outlets there exists, right? And how much that has factored into discourse shifting on Israel. That part is correct. She's basically saying the correct thing, but has the exact opposite opinion that I do, with one exception. Nick Fuentes is anti-Semitic. Okay? She thinks foreign news is inherently expressing extreme views against Israel. Lamau just admitted the U.S. media runs cover for everything they do. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. But as far as her saying, like, nowadays people are getting extreme information. Like, when she says extreme information about Israel, she's wrong. It's not extreme information. It's just true. Okay? It's just the correct information on Israel. She's obviously upset about it. But hold on. Let's continue. Yeah, Al Jazeera equals Fuentes is the crazy one. One is a Nazi. The other one's a respected international news outlet. Exactly. But from where she's standing, there is no difference between Al Jazeera and Nick Fuentes. And I assume there would not be a lot of difference between Al Jazeera and Nick Fuentes and someone like myself either.
Less and less text, more and more videos. So you have TikTok just smashing our young people's brains all day long with video of carnage in Gaza. And this is why so many of us can't have a sane conversation with younger Jews, because anything that we try to say to them, they are hearing it through this wall of carnage. So I want to give data.
Yeah. We're trying to have data-backed conversations. We're trying to have honest conversations with younger Jews, but we can't, because all they see is the real carnage that Israel is doing in Gaza. It's like, no, you're just upset that you can't brainwash young Jews anymore because they know the truth about Israel. They see the reality that Israel is committing the carnage. I'm sorry, but the wall of carnage, which is the reality of what Israel is doing, is is exactly the reason why people are no longer with Israel, because there's no way to control the flow of information and contextualize that violence, or at least shelter the population from said violence. And that's precisely the reason why, yes, people are not believing bullshit coming out of Israel any longer. But wait, there's more.
Data and information and facts and arguments, and they are just seeing in their minds college, and I sound obscene. And,
by the way, it's because you are obscene. You are literally trying to do genocide defense. Okay? It's so funny. She's like, I come across as obscene when I try to defend my favorite fascist ethno state that's currently committing a genocide. It's really up.
Well, I think, unfortunately, the very smart, bet that we made on Holocaust education to serve as anti-Semitism education, in this new media environment, I think that is beginning to break down a little bit.
This is why I said this is like literally what I talk about a lot. She just has the opposite opinion of me on this issue.
Because, Holocaust education is absolutely essential, but I think it may be confusing some of our young people about anti-Semitism because they learn about big, strong Nazis hurting weak, emaciated Jews. And they think, oh, anti-Semitism is like anti-black racism, right? Powerful white people against powerless black people. So when on TikTok all day long they see powerful Israelis hurting weak, skinny Palestinians, it's not surprising that they think, oh, I know, the lesson of the Holocaust is you fight Israel. You fight the big, powerful people hurting the weak people.
Bro, that's bar for bar what I have talked about. Except I think it's good to do Holocaust education and also learn those lessons. She thinks it's bad. That's the difference between never again means never again for everyone versus never again means never again just for Jews. Okay? If your attitude is never again means never again just for Jews, what the did you think? Like, no, the Holocaust happened. It was a uniquely evil incident. And it must never have to be as violent as we want to be in Israel. And you can't say a damn thing about it. That's the education, or that's the understanding that she has over this. Whereas, as I have explained over and over again, never again means never again for everybody. And of course, like the entire point of the Holocaust and Holocaust education is so that we learn from the evils of the Holocaust, the evils of the Nazi regime. Even the mention of like the weak, emaciated Jew is like, I think, a not so subtle reference to the anti-Semitism that you often hear from Zionists. The anger and resentment that some Zionists feel towards victims of the Holocaust as like weak Jews. The notion that like Zionism means you are a strong Jew, a powerful Jew, a violent one that does not find violence to be repugnant. Of course, I, jokingly referenced this. I said, Holocaust education is too successful. It made the kids anti-Holocaust while Israel is trying to do one. Because that's basically the perspective here. And what's crazier about this is that like this position is Kahanis. It's like an ultra Zionist position. It's not supposed to be a normal position. And yes, my noise gate was not active. I turned it on. Thank you, Chatter, for calling it out. When education is not liberating, the dream of the oppressed is to become the oppressor. It's crazy that, this is such a unique insight. It's not so unique if you use the translate button that no longer exists on Twitter for Hebrew, but it is actually almost refreshing in how open this is. Jeet here says, pro-Israel advocates argues that her side is losing public opinion among young people because 1, the wide circulation of horrific images from Gaza, and 2, Holocaust education creating a racist worldview. This does not lead her to question her worldview. It's just crazy. It's crazy to just like openly state that the Holocaust education that we correctly tied to anti-Semitism was a brilliant move, except for when that Holocaust education also moved beyond just anti-Semitism and moved in the direction of teaching Americans about anti-black racism and teaching Westerners about, the the dynamic between the oppressed and the oppressor. And understandably, many people who weren't brainwashed early on and successfully into having a firm commitment of loyalty to the state of Israel looked at that, learned the right lessons, and realized that never again means never again for all. And then the lesson is that Israel is currently doing it, and that is also unacceptable. I'm going to talk about the Senate passing the Epstein files and stuff in a second. Hold on. This is my starting point, and then we're going to get to the Epstein files. Just let me dance around these, let me talk about all this, okay? Her full comment is posted on YouTube.
Diaspora, Jewish community in the...
Think about Jews and Israel. New, I think, generational divide here. And I think that's particularly true in that social media is now our source of media. And this, it used to be...
This is also crazy because, she's supposed to be a progressive. She's a speechwriter for Obama.
That
this is an unimaginably racist statement, Because Zionism is a racist ideology. It's so crazy that this is a major contradiction in the minds of otherwise quote unquote progressive people. This is a purely evil statement. Nobody reads it in the same way, or at least more and more people are starting to read it in the same way, but there's still tremendous amounts of pushback. But it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? You're an Obama speechwriter. If you talk this way about the Klan versus black people, people would understand that you are a white supremacist. But when you talk about Israel versus Palestinians, people still have not reached a level of understanding that you are operating on the same exact supremacist, fascist belief system. Do you understand?
That's not how the Holocaust happened, right? This
is not new from Barry Weiss. This is not Barry Weiss chatter. This is a different person. This is an Obama speechwriter.
We know that it happened because the Germans insisted that the Jews, 1% of the population, were responsible for all their problems, just like people insist that Israel, the size of New Jersey, is responsible for all the world's problems today. But that's not really what you take away from Holocaust education. You take away the images of power, powerless. And you also don't really learn about Islamist anti-Semitism and Soviet anti-Zionism, which is so much of what I'm seeing, especially on campus with young people today. And I think that zooming back...
I don't know why the chatter said, give us her full quote, because this literally makes it worse. She then follows it up with, all of the anti-Israel sentiment comes from Islamist anti-Semitism and Soviet anti-Zionism, which, again, inherently white supremacist construct. Why? Because the Soviets are white. Okay? I assume she has some kind of Eastern European heritage, Ashkenazi Jew, and therefore it's different. The Soviet anti-Zionism, still bad, just different than Islamist anti-Semitism. As though Muslims only oppose Israel because of some ancient entities and not because post-1948 Israel has been an incredibly violent entity in the region that was specifically designed as a settler colonial apparatus to destabilize the entire fucking region and kill a shit ton of Palestinians, both Muslims and Christians alike. Allowing anti-Zionism into the convo, but only through a non-Arab lens, yes. No, for sure. For sure. That is also by design, for the record. That is also deliberate. Make no mistake. It's so goddamn annoying. A God war with no gods, only men? What she says makes no sense at all. There was no strong anti-Zionist movement in the USSR. There was anti-Semitism, but that was your old-timey medieval kind. A lot of Israel hella races the Jews from the Soviet Union, actually. No, the USSR's position was pro-Israel initially and then very quickly turned into an anti-Zionist one. That's not wrong. That's correct. Yeah, I already said this, but crazy part of this is at 140 when she backhandedly argues against Holocaust education because it can lead people to sympathize with American black people and Palestinians. I mean, the reason why I find this to be illuminating is because I say this all the fucking time. The reason why Americans are so knowledgeable, it all ties back to American foreign policy, okay? Israel played a formative role as a Cold War ally to the United States of America. It's played an incredibly important role throughout numerous different forms of American foreign policy, okay? And as a bulwark against socialism in the region when pan-Arabic nationalism was moving in the direction of offering sympathies and loyalties to the USSR with anti-imperialist ideology, anti-colonialist ideology, Israel was still the very same destabilizing factor that it plays today. Okay? Israel also played a formative role in espionage in the region. It was a forward operating base, an unsinkable aircraft carrier, yada, yada, yada. But because it was such a profoundly important aspect of American foreign policy at the time, and still is seen even in modernity as like a very important part of American foreign policy, which I think is changing a little bit as well, because it's like kind of outliving its usefulness, but that's a totally separate point. All of that importance is the reason why Zionist education was basically allowed on American soil and was as successful as it was on U.S. soil. Because America looked at the situation and was like, no, it's great. It's great. You can have as much pro-Israel sympathies as you'd like. This is a very important ally. And the ways in which Zionist education was paired up with anti-Semitism education was also successful. This is why I say that as far as marginalized identities goes, especially in modern day when there is no systematic discrimination towards Jews in the United States of America, while there is racism, like anti-Semitism towards Jews, the persecution of Jews is not the same as it used to be historically, and it's certainly different than the persecution of black people, brown people at the systematic level in the United States of America. Anti-Semitism seemingly is the only type of bigotry that has no institutional permission whatsoever. Right? It's the one type of bigotry that like you just cannot engage with. And that's part of the reason why Nick Fuentes and many other right-wingers who are anti-Semitic actually exhaust this contradiction and exhaust this hypocrisy to their own benefit. But the real reason for that is not because Jews are magical people with the power of hypnosis or as Nick Fuentes says, organized Jewry. The real reason for that is because, like I described, the American government broadly considered Israel to be an important part of their foreign policy apparatus. And therefore, all of this Zionist education was encouraged. Not just allowed, but encouraged, as the chatter also correctly pointed out. This way, Americans could also feel comfortable about this allegiance and sending hundreds of billions of dollars to this tiny state the size of New Jersey over the course of 80 years. That's it. That's also the reason why AIPAC does not get hit with a FARA restriction, doesn't have to register as a foreign agent. That's the same reason why there are not only lobbying initiatives, but also educational initiatives that play a formative role in changing people's consciousness or changing people's attitudes about Israel early on. All because, and that's the reason why anti-Semitism, even if it's being cynically deployed against critics of Israel, or especially when it's deployed against critics of Israel cynically, is seen as the only type of bigotry that is not allowed, right? There's a bipartisan consensus on censorship and deplatforming, cancellations, whatever you want to call it, for critics of Israel. And here is former Obama speechwriter Sarah Hurwitz saying the quiet part out loud. The reason why the Holocaust education was so good, especially when tied against anti-Semitism education, was because we could have made a positive argument towards Israel and why Israel must exist and why Israel must be a violent country, okay? But now people are looking at the Holocaust education and going, well, never again means never again for all, especially if it's not paired up with a shit ton of Zionist propaganda early on and social conditioning, brainwashing, and the like. That's the problem. Young Jews are not buying it. They're not buying the pro-Israel arguments. They're not buying the pro-Israel arguments, and they're encountering the truth about Israel far before they actually go on that birthright trip by college, or by high school, whenever people do birthright. That is a major issue. That is the issue. And that is, I suspect, a big part of the reason why there is this attitude towards anyone who's a loud and proud and outspoken critic of Israel. There is this universalization of like anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, which is a dangerous conflation that actually does not serve the interests of Jews in general. But it's being done regardless. And here's Barry Weiss doing that. Chris Menahan says, well said, Hasan. Did you see that Barry Weiss took aim at you at the Jewish Leadership Conference on Sunday? They're not releasing any of the videos from the event, or else I'd clip them. Barry Weiss told the Jewish Leadership Conference she'll use her position at CBS News to counter voices like Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Andrew Tate, and Hasan Piker. One of these things is not like the others. Can you tell me? Can you tell who's different than the rest of these guys? Think about that. Think about how primarily invested you must be in Israel to look at 4 individuals, popular in very different ways, okay? 3 of them have virtually identical worldviews, or at least are on the same side politically. The other is on the exact opposite side politically. But what is the reason why Barry Weiss says these guys are all the same? How fucking schizophrenic do you have to be to look at Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, Andrew Tate, and then add Hasan Piker into that fucking equation? I'm sorry, but if you look to that mention by Barry Weiss and you go, that's right, this is dangerous. That's right, this is a dangerous prospect. All of these guys are the same. You are not living in the same universe that we are all living in. Anyway, as for Weiss, who was named the CBS News after 4 years at the helm of the consistently pro-Israel Free Press, said she hoped to use her new position to counter the voices like the ones at the center of Sunday's discussion. The choice is that it feels like we have sometimes, which is the progressive streamer Hasan Piker and Tucker Carlson or Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate, the kind of people who are rising in the podcast charts. Like, this was such a crazy mention that even the article itself had to put bracket quotes next to my fucking name to be like, progressive streamer Hasan Piker and Tucker Carlson or Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate, the kind of people who are rising in the podcast charts, those who don't actually represent our values, Weiss said. And I don't think that they represent the values or the worldview of the vast majority of Americans. They had to add in the fucking context to be like, this guy's a little bit different than the rest of the people that they're talking about here. If I was at least remotely invested in being a grifter and did not have a strong moral compass, I would lean into this. These are profoundly popular figures. I would probably have a lot less fucking haters too, because I would say around 50% at this point of the hatred that I get is from these guys, right? It's from those guys and their fan bases. And despite the attempts made by the likes of Barry Weiss and whatnot to pair me up with these guys, I still refuse to align with them. Longtime lurker, first-time chatter, just tuned in. What is your take on everyone turning cope from prior to the shutdown? What do you mean? I'm literally looking at an argument I just had with an Israeli apologist who was talking shit about you. Yeah, the difference, of course, is that because Israel is so unpopular, what a lot of these guys don't realize is that this kind of lumping people in together only boosts the popularity and legitimacy of all those involved. Because at this point, being against Barry Weiss and being against Israel is the popular position. But these guys do not realize that that is the popular position, or at least the ones that do realize think that there is still a way to bring the conversation back to the way things used to be. Do you understand? So at this stage, you actually have to be a little bit more honest about your coverage. You have to be more honest about the way you talk about these things. You have to make it, do I want to look at the situation with sincerity and recognize that some people are against anti-Semitism, but also anti-Zionist because they're anti-fascists. And some people are against Israel because they are fascists and jealous that Israel gets to do fascism with American dollars. I would say that Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson are on the second side, the latter, rather than the former. I'm against Israel because I'm against fascism. I'm against Israel because I'm against racism. I'm against Israel because Zionism is a fascist ideology. For people like Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, they are against Israel because Israel is a Jewish state. They are against Jews. They're against Israel because they're jealous that Israel gets to do this fascism and have a Jewish ethno-state, but Americans can't have a white ethno-state. And they tie that back to the influence and involvement of what Nick Fuentes calls the organized Jewry. They think a lot of this woke stuff comes from Jews because the worldview of the fascists needs to actually be wrapped up in a bow, right? There needs to be a missing puzzle piece there that ties all of this together. Who is the scary, dangerous outgroup puppeteering Western civilization and Western society? That's educating the children not to be racist, educating the children against fascism, educating the kids and the youth against, how they perceive Nazi Germany and other attempts to have organized fascist movements. They see that as the nefarious, dangerous, parasitic, invasive ideology of Judaism. Okay? You know who else saw it like that? The fucking Nazis. What is this? This was an inflection point? Yes. Yeah, this was a huge moment where Elon Musk said, you have said the actual truth to a Nazi who said, okay, Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of dialectical hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. I'm deeply disinterested in giving the tiniest shit now about Western Jewish populations, coming to the disturbing realization that those hordes of minorities that support flooding their country don't exactly like them too much. You want the truth said to your face, there it is. This is the purest distillation of Nazi ideology, fascist ideology in the West. This is how a lot of white supremacists feel. They think Jews are responsible for woke. Jews are responsible for socialism and woke. And in some respects, Jews are responsible for socialism, but I mean that in a positive way. They mean that in a negative way. I like it. So there is that, but, they say Jews are responsible for woke and socialism. I say Jews are responsible for woke and socialism to a certain degree. In brackets, this is positive. /POS. /positive. But that's it, right? Judeo-Bolshevism was the argument that the Nazis presented because they were anti-socialist. They were anti-communist. And they saw socialism and communism as a Jewish ideology. Jews being responsible for woke and socialism goes all the way back to the protocols. It's that old of a trope. Yes, Lenin wasn't Jewish. Yeah, but much like myself, Lenin was a friend to the Jews. And that's enough for these guys. Yeah, the OG beacon of Christianity was a socialist Jew. His name was Jesus, but we're not going to get into that right now. Look, my point is, Israel has destroyed, I think, a lot of people's attitudes. It has bastardized Jewish history. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, and this kind of sentiment falls on deaf ears for those who are primarily invested in the continuation of the Zionist project. But that is the truth. Look up posters of Trotsky during the Nazi era. Yeah, exactly. Trotsky was considered the white guy annihilator. Okay, the guy who was killing all the goyim is the way that they fucking presented him, and still do to this day. By the way, Marxism is part of Western thought as well. No, of course, obviously. Yusuf Munayer says, so the lesson people are supposed to take from the Holocaust education is that genocide, mass killing, and war crimes are actually okay. What is really remarkable about this is that they still don't understand how absurd this sounds and how many people will turn away from it in disgust. This is especially stunning considering the Holocaust is mandated to be taught in some 30 states as a result of state laws, which have been the product of important work done by American Jewish communities. I am not sure any other historical world history episode is so broadly taught in the U.S. Yeah, her comments about the weak, feeble Jew and young Jews are now seeing themselves Palestinians is bar for bar Jabotinsky. Yeah, to take the typical Yid of today and to imagine his diametrical opposite in his tribute to Theodore Herzl, said Jabotinsky. This is The same reason why, what is it? What was it? Like Zionists actually called the Holocaust survivors soap or something? Like, isn't that, what was it? Our starting point is to take the typical Yid of today and to imagine his diametrical opposite. Because the Yid is ugly, sickly, lacks decorum. We shall endow the ideal image. Oh, by the way, Jabotinsky is literally the OG Jewish fascist. Okay? Theodor Herzl aside, like, he was the other OG godfather of Zionism and was like a straight up fucking Jewish Nazi. As close to, like, the type of attitude that you hear from, you know, the average Israeli ultranationalist. Yid is shortened for Yiddish, and probably a slur, as a matter of fact, right? I don't know. But I assume it's he means it as a pejorative. He doesn't. Yeah, Netanyahu's father worked for Jabotinsky and had the Likud party, was originally Jabotinsky's party. Jabotinsky is also responsible for Beitar, if you guys have seen. Anything's a slur if you mean it. HasanAbi. I have a question. How can you be a socialist but also have the control of all the world's capital banks? Didn't the Nazis see the contradiction? What are you talking about? There is no logical. This is just pure hatred, okay? You need to understand. You need a good villain, okay? And for the Nazis, it was the Jews. And it was anything that was woke, really, but definitely the Jews. And at this point, you have to realize, like, when people fucking hate you, they just make shit up. There's no need for contradiction. There's no need to understand contradictions. It's no different than the way people operate towards me, for example. There's a lot of people out there that just, like, fucking despise me and have decided, there's a lot of fascists that have decided, like, I am their number one op. So no matter what I do, they will find a way to just say, like, oh, you are both simultaneously powerful and weak at the same time. I'm both incredibly gay and woke, but also in control of... I'm incredibly gay, woke, and weak, but also in control of fucking Twitch, for example, you know? But also, Twitch bans me because I'm dangerous and worthy of being banned. Anyway... The Yid is trodden upon and easily frightened, and therefore the Hebrew ought to be proud and independent. The Yiddish is despised by all, and therefore the Hebrew ought to charm all. The Yiddish has accepted submission, and therefore the Hebrew ought to learn how to command. The Yiddish want to conceal his identity from strangers, and therefore the Hebrew should look to the world straight in the eye and declare, I am a Hebrew. The dynamic between Yiddish and Hebrew, by the way, is not only a reflection of Jews that lived in Eastern Europe and whatnot, or Jews that lived in Germany, and Hebrew being Israelis. Okay, is that let the charming fall by the wayside? Well, the point is Hasan is gay swole. The point is that attitude won. Okay, that attitude, the common attitude now. That is now the common attitude in Israel. That is the common attitude of the Zionist. I see the sunrise in the background. Good morning. Yes, it is 7:30 a.m. here in Chengdu. Israel literally caught and held Eichmann on trial in Israel instead of at The Hague because they were trying to get the rest of the Israelis to stop looking down on Holocaust survivors. Holy mouth sounds, dude. Jeez, suck me. Okay. And make those exact same mouth sounds with your mouth with my penis in it. How about that? Shut the fuck up. Paramount CEO David Ellison set to attend tonight's East Room dinner with President Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, per a source.